I think you could make a case that this team is not, that if they're one player away, it's just that player being available, and it's the New Orleans Pelicans. You look at all the different ways they're built to play. We already mentioned on the previous podcast the numbers where they're going small with Zion when Trey Murphy's on the court. They've been absolutely destroying opponents. Such a small sample size, you can't read too much into it. There are problems with this team where it's you look at them and it's, well, we'd like to have players on the court who can subsidize higher three-point volume and accuracy, but that also might just be Trey Murphy in this year's version of CJ McCollum, and a version of Brandon Ingram that is going to be willing to take more three-pointers. Then it's, well, what about a friendlier center to play next to Zion, and or a guy who's going to defend bigs? It's like, well, they have Herb and Dyson if they want to downsize for that. Jonas Valanciunas, we've talked a lot about whether in the past, whether they should move, not this year. Jonas Valanciunas has kind of played his way into the territory of, unless you were going to go get Brook Lopez and Miles Turner, it's Jonas Valanciunas just belongs on your team. And so it's, okay, well, they have Larry Nance. I think they need more of a proven, sizable rim protector. That is not going to be Larry Nance, who's also just never healthy. I'll throw Chris Boucher's name out here. He might be somebody. He's been shooting in limited minutes and unlimited volume. Like the three fell for him this year, and he's still someone who in theory can give you just some rim protection juice. Is he big enough though? He's not the biggest player either. Is it that level of player, or do they need, I've seen people want to consolidate into Zach LaVine, which I just don't. You have Brandon Ingram, and I know Zach LaVine is a better off-ball fit, but Brandon Ingram has a higher defensive gear, and I think because we've seen it, he's just going to be more valuable in big games with the way that he plays. It might not always be intertwined cohesively with the way Zion Williamson plays, but Brandon Ingram can get you these from-scratch buckets from tough shots, tough spots against set defenses. And you can sort of say the same about Zach LaVine, but we haven't necessarily seen Zach LaVine in these higher leverage games. We've seen Brandon Ingram more higher leverage games than Zach LaVine at this point.
Do you think it's outdated to say that I still want a switchable floor stretching big? Like that still is just like the healthy Larry Nance that's a real threat to shoot it. Like if that still feels like the one player to me. Although because as you think about the Pelicans, like clearly their most fun lineup to me is CJ McCollum, Herb Jones, Ingram, Zion, and Trey Murphy. And just like figure out how you're going to guard. Cause everyone besides Herb Jones, we know what he's going to do, but figure out the rest of it. And then that team offensively is just like unstoppable. It seems like to me. So like, I guess so whoever they go and get, like, I still think that's the five I like the most. I have no idea what the numbers are for that team.
So you're saying, and that's what's interesting is that do they need to acquire someone who cracks, let's say, their closing five or their best five?
Right. Well, so like the problem with that lineup is like, there's a lot of places to attack, and it's going to be like very few defenders there are capable against like one position, let alone several. And so I just want a five that can move around on the perimeter if he has to. If you can defend the rim, awesome. Like this is such a great, like this is again like I guess it's like Brook Lopez, but he can move. Like that's what I'm asking for here. That just still feels like to truly unlock the best offensive version of this team. It still feels like you want to be 5 out as often as you possibly can, and then you want to also be able to have someone that can kind of put fires out when McCollum gets beat or can't guard his matchup, or same for Zion, or same for, whatever, like even Ingram, dies on every screen that's ever been set on him, like someone that can navigate that a little better just to keep the offense, at its peak potential. And then also just be sort of a monkey wrench, like on defense, where it can just like, we'll fix that. Like that type of defensive player.
I will say, I am more comfortable and I don't know if this person would then crack their closing lineup or this type of player, just because of what Zion's able to do in confined spaces. And then some of the outlets they have at full strength with Trey Murphy, with CJ McCollum, even with Brandon Ingram, if you loop him into there. I don't know that the next big that they get needs to be a floor spacer. If it was Nick Claxton, I would love him on this team. You talk about switchable and give you some rim protection. I did think, again, this isn't someone who cracked their closing lineup, which maybe would speak to why we have the Pelicans here and we're having this discussion. Zach Collins, if the Spurs were willing to move off of him, I don't know if they would be. And he does stretch the floor. Is he going to be the one guarding fives? But if you're playing him with Herb and maybe Dyson's in those combinations with Zion, there's just a bunch of different stuff that you could really do there.
like Mo Wagner. Like, I don't know, you get the defense there, but he plays with such a crazy motor and he's shot the hell out of it this year. I mean, if you're looking for, although I don't think Orlando's going to move him, just,
Well, yeah, if you were going to get an Orlando big, Wendell Carter Jr. would be perfect
yeah,
for the
sure.
team.
Or even Isaac. Like, Isaac's not going to give you the spacing, but if you're talking about someone that'll put out fires everywhere, that's your guy. Him and Herb Jones on the floor at the same time, that would be just unholy.
He might not be 5-y enough, and his team's not going to trade him. So it's kind of like Nas Reed would be perfect for this team.
Yeah.
Chet Holmgren.
You think they'd move him? All right.
So my final question on the Pelicans is just, there's been some rickety stuff with them. They're not as good in the transition defense as they were in, the past couple years. We'll see how it comes together if their personnel is just generally more available. Is it outside the realm of possibility to say, if they stay healthy, this team comes out of the Western Conference? Because even if we're saying we're not even, the issue with the conversation we're having with them is there's maybe been one. Did we even mention one player for real? Chet Holmgren, obviously, but like with all sincerity, that would crack their closing lineup, because then we're just mentioning ostensibly not regular season innings eaters, but first 38 minutes of a game innings eaters. And if we're saying that's what they need, then our issue isn't necessarily the Pelicans makeup. It's, are they going to be healthy enough? Are they deep enough with this skill set? Because the top end of their roster is good enough to be a contender.
It is not beyond the realm of possibility at all. I mean, we keep referring to it, but they've had flashes where, like, when they have all their guys, they're way up there in the West. And so, like, it's difficult to sort of, because then you're asking, like, well, how did they beat the Nuggets or one or two other teams that might be up there? And the answer is, I don't know, but like they definitely have the talent, they have the depth, they have so many pieces. That's why it's so interesting to talk about this team as a trade team, because they've got enough, they're a perfect like 2-for-1 or 3-for-1 trade team, because they have, again, I keep exaggerating, there's like a dozen guys that I like out on the floor for various reasons. But yeah, I think you're right. Like, it's an interesting position to be in where you're saying, like, unless you're really going for it with a trade, the guys that are going to matter in the most important minutes are kind of already there. It's just, what's the combination and how can they all get on the floor?
I will say they would be one of the 3 to 4 or 5 teams that I think could, and I'm curious, I'm actually throwing this out there because I want to know if you think he would make a big enough difference. They are one of the, I would say, even, I don't know how many teams could make this other team think about it. They would be a team that has an offer they could give to Toronto that I think makes Toronto think about moving OG Anunoby.
Just because
they think that's redundant with having Herb Jones and Trey Murphy, or is it OG can really defend fives as well? And so you have OG and Herb and Trey Murphy and Zion, and then pick. You want Brandon Ingram? Done. Yeah. You want CJ? You want Jose Alvarado in that lineup? I don't fucking care. It'll work.
Yeah, I don't think Anunoby is redundant with anybody. I think
that's fair.
I think you just throw him out there, and it's like, a guy that can guard every position and make open threes, that's not redundant. I guess provided you have one or two other players on the floor that make it so Anunoby doesn't have to create offense. As long as he's in a position where he doesn't have to do what he's not good at, he just, that'd be phenomenal.